The clock on the wall strikes 11 p.m., its rhythmic ticking the only sound in the suffocating silence of a Saturday night. I am 17 years old, lying perfectly still in my childhood bed, enveloped by complete darkness. Downstairs, the rhythmic breathing of my parents signals they are fast asleep, yet the house is not secure. The front door remains unlocked, not by accident, but by design. Soon I hear the heavy, deliberate thud of boots against the wooden porch, followed by the slow groan of the stairs. A boy is ascending toward my sanctuary, a stranger I have spoken to perhaps twice in my entire life. In any other world, this would be a nightmare. In my old order Amish community, this is bundling. He will lie beside me under my grandmother's quilt until the first light of dawn. This isn't a secret or an act of rebellion. It is the sacred path to finding a husband. My name is Rebecca, and tonight my journey into a tradition guarded by silence begins.
In my community, the path to a lifelong union begins not with a whisper of romance, but with the rigid structure of the Sunday singing. After turning 16, these youth gatherings become the primary stage for social survival. We sit in rows, voices rising in ancient German hymns, while eyes dart across the room, gauging potential partners. However, the true negotiations happen in the shadows. A boy who is interested in you will never approach you directly. Instead, he seeks out your brother to ask for permission to visit your bedside. When my brother Amish delivered the news that a suitor was coming, the choice felt like an illusion. While I technically held the right to refuse, saying no too often carried a heavy price. In a world where marriage is the only acceptable future for a woman, a streak of rejections earns you a reputation for being proud, picky, or difficult. To fit into the fold, I learned to silence my own hesitation. I traded my comfort for the safety of belonging, agreeing to open my door to boys I barely knew. My first experience with bundling was with a boy named Amish. He was 19, with shoulders broad enough to pull a plow, and a face that turned a deep, painful crimson whenever someone spoke to him. That Saturday night, I lay in my bed, paralyzed by the rhythmic creak of the stairs under his heavy weight. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. When the door finally opened, Amish crossed the room as if he were navigating a minefield. The bed frame groaned under his mass as he sat on the edge, then carefully lay down on top of the quilt. He remained fully clothed, his arms locked straight at his sides like a corpse. We lay there in a silence so thick it felt physical. Finally, I whispered, "How was the harvest?" "Good," he grunted. Then nothing. For hours I threw out syllables of conversation, and he returned them in fragments. By 2 a.m. he was snoring. He left before dawn without asking to return, leaving me with the chilling realization that this empty, silent proximity was what my world called courtship. 3 weeks later, the stairs creaked again, but the footsteps were different, lighter, more rhythmic, and far more certain. This time, it was Levi, a 20-year-old, whose confidence had already made him a whispered legend at the Sunday singings. Unlike Amish, Levi did not hesitate at the threshold of my room. He crossed the floor with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. Without waiting for an invitation, he slid under the heavy quilt, his shoulder pressing firmly against mine. "Cold out there," he whispered,
his voice low and dangerously warm. At first, his charm was a relief. He told stories that made me laugh and asked questions that made me feel interesting. But as the hour passed, his arm draped casually over my shoulder, and my entire body went rigid. Slowly, his hand began to move, tracing small, persistent circles against the fabric of my nightgown. When I finally grabbed his wrist and whispered, "Stop," he didn't apologize. Instead, he let out a long, frustrated exhale. "I thought you were okay with it," he muttered. "Most girls are." The morning after Levi's visit, the sun felt too bright, and the Sunday service felt like a hollow performance. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion. Was I being unreasonable? Was this touching a normal part of the tradition that I was simply too naive to understand? I looked at my mother and sisters, wondering if they had also lain in the dark, frozen by the same unwanted advances. The silence in our community was absolute, a thick veil that protected the tradition while leaving the girls within it entirely exposed. Unable to carry the weight alone, I pulled my best friend Mary aside behind the barn. When I whispered Levi's name and asked if his hands had moved the same way with her, the color drained from her face. Mary's eyes instantly filled with tears. "I didn't stop him," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I thought I was supposed to let him. I thought that was what bundling was." We stood there, two 17-year-old girls, realizing we had no language to name our discomfort, and no one to tell that something was deeply wrong. The winter brought a new visitor to the unlocked door, Eli. He was 21, a quiet furniture maker who moved with a deliberate, gentle grace. When he entered my room, he didn't move toward the bed immediately. Instead, he stood just inside the threshold, his silhouette framed by the moonlight. "I want you to know something before I come any closer," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but steady. "My hands are going to stay on top of the blanket where you can see them. I am only here to talk to you, Rebecca. That is all." For the first time in months, the knot of tension in my chest unraveled. Eli lay down on top of the quilt, his fingers folded peacefully over his stomach. We talked, truly talked, about our dreams, our fears, and the world beyond the farm. He never assumed, he always asked. After 3 visits, he softly asked to hold my hand, and months later, our first kiss felt like a revelation of both desire and safety. The years following my departure from the Amish community have been a journey of reclamation. Through therapy, I finally found words that were stolen from me in the dark. I came to understand that while bundling with Eli taught me the beauty of intimacy, the system that placed me in a bed with Levi was fundamentally broken. It was a tradition that demanded my presence but offered no protection, a world where no was treated as a social failure rather than a sacred boundary. Today, I share my story not to condemn my heritage, but to break the silence that once defined me. Tradition is only as holy as the safety it provides to those within it. My marriage to Eli flourished because we built it on a foundation of conversation and consent, something many couples never achieve. To any girl who grew up where her body felt like it wasn't her own to protect, I see you. Your confusion was not weakness, and your silence was never consent. I am Rebecca, and I am finally ready to share the truth.